going on, everyone? John Matrix here. So, after the last video we did about Jaghatai Khan, I was gonna do a video on Mortarion. I don't know, my brain for some reason, whenever I start pronouncing his name, just does whatever it wants. Anyway, I was gonna do a video on him because they kind of established a rivalry between them during the Jaghatai video, so I thought, let's do him next. But it was overwhelmingly requested by you guys for me to do Konrad Curze next, so that's what we're doing here. We're checking out the tragic life of Konrad Curze's entire character history, voice acted 40K lore from the Amber King. I'm just gonna jump right into it. As always, link below down in the description to this video, so if you want to check out the original video without my commentary, etc., and if you want to check out the Amber King's channel, which I highly encourage you to do, at least if you haven't, go over there, give him a sub, give him a like on this video. He's a great content creator. He makes a lot of great Warhammer 40K stuff, very in-depth detail, character lore and history, and a lot of it's voice acted, so he puts a lot of time and effort into it, and he definitely deserves some love, so go over there and check out his stuff. But for now, we're just gonna get right into it. This is another 2-hour plus video, so I will more than likely be breaking this up into at least 2, maybe 3 parts, depending on, you know, how often I pause and ask questions, speculate, etc., etc. But anyway, let's just get into it here. So volume, boom, monitor, boom, let's go.
Justice is my purpose. The only route to total justice.
I'm
is
Batman.
Fear. We are the weapon of fear no other legion dared to be. I became the sinner, the monster, the night haunter.
Looking to support the Amber King channel? Fenris Workshop are offering a fantastic deal on their wargaming products. Bring to life the battlegrounds and drama of the Horus Heresy, with Gamer's Grass and Green Stuff World's gorgeous range of basing materials. Treat yourself to a new Rosemary
blurred out, but okay.
brush set, and capture the detail and care your miniatures deserve. And for those looking to save money, get amazing discounts on the range of second-hand miniatures Fenris Workshop has available. Build that force you always dreamed about without breaking the bank. Fenris Workshop's Order of the Stormcallers loyalty program offers a fantastic range of rewards, cash back, loot bags of different sizes, exclusive merch, and special products, all for buying the equipment you need. Paints, basing materials, miniatures, and so much more are all available at fenrisworkshop.com. Thank you so much, Fenris Workshop, for sponsoring this video.
W sponsor. Okay, so we're starting out on a Order in Nostromo, which is interesting that I wonder if this is something else that they ripped from Alien or Aliens. I believe the Nostromo is the name of the spaceship in Aliens, the second Alien movie, that the Colonial Marines were on. I believe it's the Nostromo. I might be confusing it with the first one, and the Nostromo might be the name of the spaceship from the first one. But I'm pretty sure that Nostromo is actually the name of the Colonial Space Marine spaceship. So I find that kind of interesting that that's kind of what his home planet is named off of here. So, but yeah, interesting. Just looking at the chapters here. Okay.
These humans, their imaginations are strong. Kill 1,000 men and they will hate you. Kill 1,000,000 men and they will queue to face you.
Yeah.
But kill a single man and they will see monsters and devils in every shadow. Kill 12 men and they will scream and wail in the night, and they will feel fear, not hatred. They are panicky, gossiping beasts, these humans. It serves us to allow them to be so.
Justice, madness, self-righteousness. guilt and fear, the cornerstones of the broken mind that is Konrad Curze, Primarch of the 8th Legion, the Night Haunter. In a universe filled with horrifying demons and monstrous xenos, it would be a human, a transformed, an elevated one, but still a man that would inspire the adrenaline-spiked dread that haunts our species, reminding us of the time when we were ignorant savages that cowed from creatures in the night. The legacy of the Night Haunter is a brutal, sadistic, fear-driven ethos whose scars reverberate all the way to the 41st millennium.
I was going to say also the nickname, the Night Haunter. That's a pretty sick nickname, dude. That's a pretty sick nickname for your enemies to label you as.
But who is the man, Konrad Curze, the person behind the veil of the Night Haunter? His story begins in the 30th millennium.
As all the Primarchs
Above a
do.
bleak and dark world, a gestation capsule roared down from the heavens. A comet, blazing with fire and light, illuminating the near perpetual darkness the planet was shrouded in. The capsule tore its way through the enormous hive city of Nostromo Quintus, plunging down into the depths, scarring the very earth itself. The capsule's landing was so violent it even broke through the planet's crust, lodging itself deep underground. Emerging
survived
from
it,
the
huh?
nearly obliterated capsule that still had the marks of claws on its burnt remains, a child opened his eyes for the very first time, finding only rubble. This child was special, elevated in a way he did not yet comprehend. His mind did not flutter to panic and fear. It chose one singular thing, one absolute to focus on: survive. The child began to dig. Minutes into his sentience, he was already in a life and death situation. His fingers began to bleed, and fistful by fistful he tore the earth above with a strength that was beyond human. Bloodied and exhausted, the child broke to the surface, finding a near pitch black existence. The polluted air filled his lungs, and he was consumed by an overwhelming sense of hunger. He needed sustenance. His pitch black eyes found the closest living thing: a human.
Very vampiric. This very vampiric feel. And I mean, honestly, I would assume that's probably what they went for originally with his idea and design, was this kind of very Dracula-esque kind of character. I mean, even this planet is kind of like, you know, a planet of perpetual night. So, yeah.
The child sat upon the anemic, pale-looking thing before him, taking his first life and devouring his flesh, consuming the poor victim's brain. The young child saw something incredible. He saw the memories of his victim, soaking in the information and melding it with the wisdom that had been seemingly imprinted upon him.
That's an interesting thing. I haven't heard that before, and I don't know of any other Primarch, at least that I've heard, that has done something like that, where, you know, they can tap into the memories of something they've, you know, consumed. And also, I wonder if that's part of, you know, because this is essentially like his first living act, was to, you know, free himself from this underground cabin that he landed in and was buried in, and then immediately kill someone and consume them. I wonder if literally because this was his first act, that already like broke something in his mind. You know what I mean? Because we don't know if the person was innocent or not. You know, this planet is a planet full of criminals, so, you know, it could very well be a situation where there's not really a whole lot of truly innocent people on this planet. So maybe the odds are the guy did something at some point in time, but still, he didn't know that. And, you know, I would guess maybe from his perspective, you know, that the first thing he did was kill an innocent person and consume them. So, like, would he already from that point on see himself as this broken thing because he did something like that? You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm getting from. And that's like really kind of the basis of how his personality came to be. And he essentially like really hated himself from the beginning. I don't know. I'm just like, again, just speculating from what I know already.
And melding it with the wisdom that had been seemingly imprinted upon him. The polluted, nocturnal hellscape around him was the world of Nostromo, a hive world where midnight perpetually reigned in its pollutant-clogged atmosphere. The geology of Nostromo was nothing short of priceless, as the world's unusual crust had unprecedented amounts of naturally occurring adamantium. Enormous Gothic hive cities.
Wolverine? This is just, you know, how Wolverine got his start. The adamantium, like, got sent from the future, been to the past, you know? Anyway.
Amounts of naturally occurring adamantium. Enormous Gothic hive cities dotted the surface. Houses and factories stacked upon each other, miles high. A maze of structures and alleys that all blended together in a disgusting concoction of pollutants that dripped down through the layers of civilization. To think about how daunting and overwhelming it would have been to be in the presence of this nightmarish place would have chilled you to the bone.
Yeah.
You saw humans, things.
I mean, just imagine, like, I mean, I guess really for some people it wouldn't be too hard to imagine, you know, some people that live way up north, you know, they have seasons where it's night for, you know, months at a time. So I can only imagine, although it's not as polluted and nasty, at least as far as I know, but I can only imagine like going for, you know, that period of time without having any kind of sunlight at all. You know, I can only imagine what it must have been like for him for the first time to like actually see a sun and a star, you know, maybe as he left his planet and just to see what light was actually like. You know what I mean?
Would have chilled you to the bone. He saw humans, things similar, but yet not quite like him. Pale-skinned people with pitch black eyes, much like the poor thing he had just devoured. From the moment he had opened his eyes, his brain had been filled with a catalogue of information. The child had understood his surroundings, technologies, and concepts to a level that was beyond an ordinary person. What he had seen was information. He was barely hours old into his sentience, and all he had known was the cold, exhaustion, hunger, and the dark. His framing for all of this came from that very first human experience he had. The perception of reality from his victim's brain, still warm in his gut.
That's interesting too. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. You know, if he was able to imprint on information from people that he eats, consumes, then that would obviously form his experience in life, you know? So yeah, I don't know. That's just an interesting point, that his experience, his life experience would be unique because he's able to experience perspectives from other people and what they've gone through. If, you know, assuming he consumes more than one person, that is, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I just find that kind of interesting.
From his victim's brain, still warm in his gut. The corpse before him was a criminal. They had seen the people of this world, the wealthy families who lived at the very top of these mega structures, enjoying the only sense of illumination the world could produce. They were corrupted, brutal thugs, vile people whose grip on power was enforced by tyranny and pain. And as the further one descended the layers of this gothic hellscape, the more desperate and depraved it became. Gangs roamed the streets, stealing, murdering, violating the population, who in turn had to steal, trick and lie just to survive. The population numbers of Nostromo was not kept down by war, sickness or murder, but in reality, self-erasure. No joy, happiness, or warmth reached a majority of the people on Nostromo. A life with no future, destined to be corrupted by sickness or murdered.
It's honestly surprising that humanity could even, like, survive in general on a planet like that, you know what I mean? But I guess it would be possible. I guess it would be possible, you know? I mean, it's not just the planet itself and the darkness, but also just, you know, the pollution, the rampant crime, the inability to really, like, make a better life really for yourself other than through crime and through essentially, you know, fighting your way up that criminal ladder, I guess. You know what I mean? So, like, again, I've said this in other videos, like, I feel like one of the main themes that always comes out in every kind of story we hear in 40K is it's really just like survival of the fittest taken to the extreme. And, you know, humanity on this planet has just adapted that way, and it's just, you got to do what you got to do to survive. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. It's just, it's interesting that in a world like that, that there would be such a high population, you know what I mean, of these giant hive cities. But then again, they also have an extremely valuable resource, you know? And obviously, if you're high enough up that ladder and you control that resource, then you can control people and, you know, get people to mine it and ship it and do whatever you need. So, I don't know.
Destined to be corrupted by sickness or murdered. The vision the child saw must have...
And that's the other thing too, is like, yeah, like, you pretty much know you're either going to die from being murdered or, you know, like I said, either some kind of random disease, some kind of random act of violence, murder, or I guess essentially also potentially just being conscripted to the military. But I guess that's also pretty much how it is on any world. It's just this world, maybe it's a little more depressing, I guess, just because of the fact that there's no daylight, at least. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more it's not necessarily, I guess, really different from a lot of other worlds, because the majority of people in other worlds, they're pretty much stuck slaving away in factories and never see the light of day, you know. Anyway, so I don't know.
Have been sickening or murdered. The vision the child saw must have been sickening. To a person so naive, what would that do to you? It was all wrong. The child felt it was wrong. Even he felt it was unjust. All of it. A sensation that seemed to have always been there, roared in his mind. He needed to fix this. Fix the world. Fix the people. He wanted to make it right. He wanted to make it just. She couldn't stand it. She clamped her hands over her ears and stifled a scream. It was funny, given what she intended to do, that she didn't want to scream. Screams brought trouble. She craved a little dignity at the end. She sobbed quietly, saliva running from her mouth. Her eyes screwed up so tightly that they vanished. Her face swirled. She never looked her best when she was weeping. Arjas always said that, teasing her tears away. A laugh tried to rise at the memory. It choked off in a strangled competition with her sorrow. She didn't hear the door. She didn't hear the slice of bladed fingers, breaking every one of her locks with metallic snaps. The apartment had been burgled many times. They had many locks. The door was scarred from battery, kicked in, bashed in, broken with hydraulic jacks. The stealthy entrance was gentle compared to the boot that had put the panels through, or the blow torches that had reduced the first lock to a puddle of metal. The entrance was conducted with the respect for the occupants. The intruder had been keen to inflict no more damage than was necessary. She was still weeping. and didn't see him when he bent over double to pull his cadaverous frame through and stand, willowy yet hulking, his inhuman head brushing the ceiling. But she did smell him. His pungent odor overcame the awful reek of the air exchanger, a heavy smell, redolent of death. Her sobs died. She took in a hitching breath, removed her hands from her ears and turned to face the creature that had come into her sanctum. She kept her eyes closed for several seconds, listening to him breathe. Quiet, yet audible over the thundering fans 100,000 lives depended on.
Night Hunter,
She said, opening her eyes as she spoke the words.
I have come for you.
Night Haunter said. His body was swathed in black rags, stitched together from the garments of a dozen looted corpses. No tailor on Nostromo would dare outfit this nightmare.
why?
She said she was too drained to feel fear. The situation was surreal.
I have done nothing wrong. I have lived all my life as well as I could.
You did not dream of City's Edge.
Everyone dreams of City's Edge.
She said, her voice was small yet defiant.
I tried to make myself into someone who could go there. I failed, but I did no wrong in trying. I have never harmed anyone, or wished to. I've suffered life here without complaint. Why are you here?
The Night Haunter's eyes glinted.
The manner of your life is not my concern. It is the manner of your death. The manner of death you have chosen is a crime.
He took a step forwards, looming over her.
There were, in ancient places, laws against self-murder.
He said,
Suicides were buried without ceremony, in shame, and those caught attempting to kill themselves were often executed.
But I want to die.
She whispered.
Not the way I will end you.
He hissed.
What I will do to you will make you wish you had opted to live. I am going to hurt you as much as it is possible to be hurt.
Why?
She breathed.
There are no taboos against taking one's life here.
Said the Night Haunter.
Many do. This is not a happy world, but it can be a better one. By killing yourself, you take the easy way out. You encourage others to do the same. You might think you add yourself to a statistic, but your self-murder is much more than that. Every suicide adds to the rot weakening your culture. Every life abandoned is a signal that change can never be effected. You throw your existence away, and in doing so lessen the value of humanity.
He reached out a hand and ran a ragged nail gently down her face.
I am going to save you. I am going to save you all. The people of this world will rise above the station of beasts. I will make them. If I have to bathe in the blood of you all to make that happen, then so be it. Justice is my purpose. The only route to total justice is fear. Without fear, there can be no order. You will suffer now to feed that fear, so that many others will live, and this decaying society take the slow road to salvation.
He pulled out a long knife he had made himself. It was unlovely, a murderer's blade, but with it he would carve the most excruciating agonies.
Wait!
She said. The blade hissed through the air.
Do not try,
He said.
You plead for something you have already forfeited.
The first cut parted the skin on her arm, shoulder to little fingertip, no deeper than the dermis, for he did not want her hide to tear when he ripped it from her living body. It was so swift a movement. The blade was so sharp. She did not feel it. Her first unbelieving gasp of pain only came when the blood spattered to the floor. She clutched her arm, her hand hopelessly unsuited to the task of closing the wound. She began to cry again, this time from fear and pain. Curze grinned.
You do not wish to die any longer, I can tell. That is unfortunate, but it must be done.
He advanced on her.
Feel joy that your death will bring justice to this world. Feel joy that I bring order.
He cut again. This time she screamed. A droplet of warm, wet red dotted his cheek. He fought the urge to lick it off. He must be sober and serious.
I assure you, I do not enjoy this at all.
That's a
His
lie.
heart's quickened at the lie.
Yeah. Okay. There were a lot of times during that whole segment that I wanted to pause and talk about what was going on, but I also didn't want to interrupt, and I just wanted to let it play out. So, I mean, it's an interesting, but honestly really fucked up perspective. I mean, and I guess that's just his character in general. I get the idea of her wanting, she's never done anything wrong to another person. She's never hurt anyone. She's never stolen from anyone, done anything bad to another person in order to make her life better or easier. And the only thing she wanted to do was to end her own life, to be rid of the suffering. So I can understand to an extent his perspective of the idea that people committing suicide encourages essentially no hope, that there is no way out, and that the only potential solace you could get from a world in an existence like that is the idea of essentially being able to have your own death in the way you want it. You know what I mean? And I could also see from a certain perspective the idea of wanting to scare someone and show them what death is like in order to get them to understand how precious life is, but that's not what he's doing. You know what I mean? The idea of hurting someone, bringing them to the brink of death so they can understand what death really feels like and what potentially they're giving up in order to get them to turn that around. I can understand from a certain perspective. I could just understand that from a certain perspective, but that's not what he's doing. He's taking it to the extreme of you need to die because your sin is taking away hope from other people by killing yourself and showing people that that's okay. It's okay to give up, and it's okay to take your own life because that's how terrible the world is that you live in, and that's your sin. And obviously deep down inside he knows that it's not right, and deep down, he says he takes no pleasure and no joy in it, but obviously deep down inside it's a lie, and he does, and he's torturing her because that's what he wants to do in that situation. It gives him an excuse to do that instead of, like I said, taking it to a certain extent and then easing off and saying, this is the one warning that I'll give you, kind of a situation. I took you to the brink of death, and now I'm allowing you to live. Think upon this, and essentially I'm giving you another chance at life. And if you don't take that chance at life, and if you try to, kill yourself again, then I'll be back, and then, maybe things will be worse, kind of situation. I don't know, but pretty fucked up, man. Pretty fucked up. So, all right. Let's continue. It's very interesting. It's interesting that he's going so far to the extreme of even punishing those who are essentially trying to kill themselves because they just they have no chance of having a better life, and all their life is suffering, and they just want it to end. And to him, even that's a sin. And it's really one of those, I mean, again, you know, I can kind of see from his perspective that he's using the excuse of, well, in other worlds and in other cultures, religions, etc., it's considered a sin. So I see it as a sin. So you're going to be punished. He's kind of using that as an excuse to have a reason to kill someone, essentially. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know. Let's continue. The Night Haunter.
An enormous, looming figure, larger than any man, with knotted muscle, long dark hair, and midnight black eyes roamed like a creature of nightmare amongst the streets of Nostromo Quintus. The boy had grown, faster than any other mortal, into an enormous man. His physical strength was incredible. His speed was almost too fast for the human eye to catch. His intelligence was fierce, but most importantly, his presence was earth-shattering. A name once screamed from the lips of hardened criminals was now spoken in hushed whispers. A title that frightened everyone. From the old...
Don't mean to interrupt him, but I'm just curious. His eyes, he even said earlier in this video, his eyes weren't black to start with, right? He had like normal human eyes. Did he develop these black eyes over time from just being on Nostromo, or from consuming, you know, maybe his victims and absorbing them into himself? Is that how his black eye, or did they just like naturally change over time from the environment that he lived in? I'm just curious.
Whispers.
If anyone knows.
That frightened everyone. From the old, even to the children. Night Haunter. The boy had begun to grow, living amongst the damp, cold, poisonous streets and alleys. The boy had no one. Only the screams and cries of a tortured and beaten down population were his constant. His first interaction with other humans had been violent. Only hate and pain reached his feral heart.
And that again goes back to things that I've said in other videos. It would be interesting to the what if, you know, theory idea, but with everything that he's gone through on this world, if he at least had someone to care for him, or someone for him to care about, how would he have gone about his pursuit of justice? Would he have still been quite as violent and as vicious? Would he have been a little bit more lenient? How would his perspective have changed? You know, et cetera, et cetera. And again, what kind of man would he have turned out to be if he had never been scattered to the winds and he was actually raised by the Emperor and Malcador and trained properly the way they wanted to? You know, these are always interesting questions that get brought up that there's never really obviously an answer to, but that's just interesting to speculate and think about.
Been violent. Only hate and pain reached his feral heart. He began to watch, a creature hidden in the dark, observing the inhabitants of his bleak world. All the boy could see was a reinforcement of the vision he had seen, taken from his first taste of human flesh. The people on Nostromo were rotten. He saw horrifying acts, vandalism, thievery, and political corruption in all of them. As he began to hunt down more sustenance, he devoured more brains of the pale-skinned people, witnessing the miserable, crime-laden lives of all. He felt the need to correct it. It was a desire that was coded into every fiber of his being. The young man began to prowl the streets of Nostromo Quintus and began to act upon his ingrained moral code.
I wonder how much of what he did during this time was based off a more of a sense of a need for order than there was a sense of justice, and that's what he was. And he was confusing justice for order. You know what I mean? Because I would think that a world like that he lives on, for the most part, that would seem pretty lawless, with only, you know, I'm sure there are certain rules of conduct, I guess you could say, between the more powerful and larger criminal organizations, so that certain wars and whatnot might not spark between them that could lead to, you know, losses of power on both sides, and, you know, how things like that happen. But I wonder if that really is part of what happened with him during this time. Was more of a need for order, and he confused that need for order, or perhaps the imprint of the person that he consumed, you know, tainted or messed with his mind in such a way that that imprint influenced him that much. Maybe it was this other person they consumed, their want for justice, even though they were, you know, a criminal themselves and did some bad things, that their want for justice and change imprinted on him, and so that kind of influenced that, you know, need for order in that way. I don't know, again, just speculating and wondering, but
Quintus and begun to act upon his ingrained moral code. Gang members, civilians and nobles would find this towering, superhuman figure lunging out of the shadows, moving at blinding speed, with only a second to comprehend the horror of what was occurring. The young man tore them to pieces, feasting upon their grey matter. A never-ending cycle began to emerge. His consumption led to more visions, a looking glass into the crimes of his now dead victims. Names, locations, and accomplices were all laid bare before him. And so the hunt began again. A twisted moral code began to form. He killed, he witnessed a crime, and then he hunted down the next. Even slaying a random civilian, he would find he was justified in their death, seeing through their own eyes the monstrous life they had led. The bodies began to pile up.
And that would be a very interesting perspective too, because I would assume that as he's killing some of these people, I don't know if he's consuming them or getting some kind of imprint, but if he is, then that would, yeah, justify anything that he does even further, because he gets to see their life and what they did. And it's honestly, the world that he lives on is a world where there probably really isn't much innocence. Then even if there really is, like the woman that he killed, she technically was innocent and that she never hurt another person. She only tried to hurt herself. He would find an excuse to exact justice, and, you know, because that's what he wanted. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that he was really just kind of a serial killer, honestly, that is maybe, I guess, deluded to seeing it as a need for justice. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see once we get towards, you know, once he meets the Emperor and the Horus Heresy, etc., like how, because I don't think it really changes his perspective. He's just able to, I guess, exact it in different ways or for a different cause, you know, because then he's exacting justice, I guess, for the Emperor by killing and hurting, you know, Xenos and people who have turned their back from the Emperor, and by doing so prevents further humans from, you know, straying from the word of the Emperor, etc. I don't know. I mean, obviously he'll talk about it, I would assume, as the video goes on, but anyway.
Entire gangs were left a broken pile of limbs. People went missing. Screams filled the nocturnal night, horrified at the monster hidden in the dark. Night Haunter. Fear the Night Haunter. The young man's philosophy began to evolve over the years. More and more died at his hands, but yet the people didn't stop. Why? Surely they knew he would end them, yet they all did not change. The nobles were still corrupt thugs, the gangs still brutalized and tortured, and the poor still stole. The young man had felt this.
I mean, I feel like it's also just like that's all they knew, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's what life is on that world, and that's all that the people know. And until you give them some other way of being, you know, that's not going to change. So just going around and killing people, I wouldn't think is really going to do much, right?
Need to, and the poor still stole. The young man had felt this need to correct their behavior. In a way, he felt he needed to save them from themselves. He wanted to shape them and this world into a just, serene place. How many times have you dreamt about shaping the world to your vision? That sensation of correcting all that is wrong in the world, to punish those who deserve it. The now enormous young man started to perfect his philosophy. He had learned so much in such a short time. He was a genius compared to those around him, and his observations of those panicky, gossipy beasts that was humanity helped him perfect his tactics. Hunting down his victims, the Night Haunter saw how humans screamed, how their hearts raced uncontrollably. Some wept, and some were too paralyzed to move. To see this enormous dark-haired man, midnight black eyes looming over you, with a voice that triggered despair in the very depths of your soul, how brave would you be? He saw how compliant the scared little creatures before him became.
That is also another interesting, I guess, idea, is the fact that no one really has a chance to fight back against him either. Like, he can pretty much, because he's a Primarch, you know, and because of his genetic mutations, manipulations, whatever you want to say, like, no normal man really has the ability to fight back against him. He's just physically able to, he's faster, stronger, smarter than any other human being on that planet. So, like, he can do whatever he wants to with anyone else with pretty much impunity. So that's also like, it's not even almost like he's doing it for sport. You know what I mean? Like, he just, it seems like he just has like this almost serial killer ingrained need to do what he's doing.
Compliant the scared little creatures before him became, as their death was moments away. Fear kept them in line, too afraid to go outside, too afraid to commit the crimes in case the Night Haunter was prowling. But murder, dismemberment, and desecration was nothing new to the people of Nostromo. Their fear of stepping out of line had to be greater than the prospect of just death. The enormous young man began to ramp up. The victims would be hunted, finding those around them torn apart. They would catch a shadow moving out of the corner of their eye. He wouldn't let them sleep. For weeks the fear would build, cascading into a full-blown manic state. The Night Haunter was coming. He knew what you had done. He knew your sins. At the moment of frenzy, when all around knew that you were walking dead, there he was, the figure of nightmare. In his clutches, death was a release begged for by his victims. Weeks upon weeks of slow, grueling torture. He broke the body and mind, broadcasting the screams and cries for all to internalize. And then the criminal would die. Justice. Crime was binaric, black and white. He did not care why someone broke order, what age they were. It only mattered that they did.
Damn.
It was discipline.
So it sounds like he even went after kids, man. I mean, and I'm trying to think of what I want to say to that, because it's like, I guess from his perspective, because of the world they live on, you know, they're just going to grow up to be criminals, and they're going to do more harm as they grow along. So might as well snuff out that problem now. You know, instead of the perspective of they're a kid, maybe try to show a little compassion and like, yeah, maybe you hurt him, maybe you rough him up a little bit, but give him a chance and try to, you know, try to get them on a better path kind of a situation. But that doesn't even, it doesn't even like seem to occur to him to do that. Like, this is just the only way to do. This is the only path there is to justice and reformation, is to make examples of all these people so that others will change, you know? It's just interesting how like unwavering he is in his perspective. And I don't know if it's even necessarily unwavering. It might just be that that's just, again, what he knows. It's like another one of these questions that there probably won't be really an answer to, but it makes me wonder how much of that first person that he killed and consumed and that imprint on him, how much that really influenced him in this. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that perspective really came or was just amplified from his Primarch nature. You know, that imprint was just amplified by that Primarch nature. That you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just interesting. If he hadn't killed and imprinted on that person or did it with someone else, you know, again, who knows how he would have turned out? Maybe it would have been exactly the same. Or if he had killed someone who was innocent, like this, you know, woman that he tortured and killed for, you know, trying to commit suicide. If, you know, that had been his first victim, and if he'd seen her life, you know, maybe his perspective on how to go about things would have been different, because he would have seen that technically she is innocent and, you know, she had suffered so much that she just wanted to end life. So maybe he would have gone through things with a little more compassion. Or maybe it's just because of his nature and how he was born and made that this is just who he is regardless. You know, this just might be part of his nature and has nothing to do with, you know, any of the knowledge that was imprinted on him at all. You know, I don't know. So I don't know. Again, it's just interesting to speculate on this stuff.
They were. It only mattered that they did. It was discipline, without any human nuance. No one had ever taught him, but most frightening of all.
And that again kind of goes like, no one ever taught him. He never had anyone to like correct him or show him that, you know, the way he's going about things isn't like, there's other ways of doing it to get the same kind of outcome. You don't have to like murder people to get the kind of outcome you're looking for. But again, it's also a situation where it seems to be what he likes to do, so that's just what he's doing.
No one had ever taught him, but most frightening of all, he enjoyed it.
Yeah, he enjoyed doing it. Which I think is also probably, you know, trying to think of how I want to word what I'm thinking of. You know, the idea that I'm trying to put forward is, you know, if he'd had a focus early on for that outlet, you know, like, not trying to say like it's okay to kill people or kill anything, you know what I mean? But like, in war, that's just part of war. Killing is a part of war. So again, had he'd been raised and taught by Malcador and the Emperor and given a focus for what the Great Crusade was going to be and an actual target and enemy, you know, maybe they would have been able to, I don't know if mitigate's the right word, or just give him more of a focus in life so that he could have, I guess, a proper outlet for what he's going through. You know what I mean? I guess that's, I don't know if I'm you know, wording it properly. Well, you know what I'm trying to get at, but just the idea that if he had some kind of alternative focus, some kind of better outlet for this need to kill, you know, maybe the you know, being a fighter warrior, you know, in on the field of battle, he could have, that's where he could have, you know, let loose essentially and then been taught to restrain himself in other, you know, aspects of life. You know, I think that's really kind of more of what I was trying to get at. Anyway.
He enjoyed it. In the pouring, polluted rain, the Night Haunter began to chase another criminal, a young boy, through the gothic streets of Nostromo Quintus. He had caught the little thing in the act of attempted violation. He gave the victim a head start. He liked it this way. Catching up to the terrified young youth, he pounced on him, breaking his body and lifting him high, ready to break him. It was then that the sensation plagued him again. The visions. He saw the future. Multiple futures. Ever since his first moments in this dark hellscape, the Night Haunter found his body at times overtaken by glimpses into the future. It even haunted his dreams. He saw titanic battles with men in ornate, powered armor, warring on distant worlds. He could see events unfold days or even weeks after he had foreseen them. He had even learned the name he was destined to have, the one that his creator had given him, or was going to give him, Konrad Curze. But what haunted him most was a vision of his own death, upon a distant, barren world, inside a room made of screaming, tortured people, sat a disheveled king in midnight-clad armor. An assassin that he knew had been sent by his father strode up to the creature that was Konrad and beheaded him. To have seen how you would die at such a young age, what would that do to the mind? To have not even had the concept of mortality and human connection, and yet see the man who you knew to be your father is responsible for your death.
Yeah.
With the terrified young Nostroman boy in his grip, Curze saw multiple possible outcomes. A future where he gave the criminal the justice he deserved. One where he spared him, reforming the broken child into a paragon. An example that would spread across this depressing world.
And so I would think him seeing that there are multiple paths forward, that would then have to give him pause and think, well, of all the people that I've killed, could they have all been reformed? Could they have all been changed? You know, have I been going about this the wrong way from the beginning? At least, you know, maybe not. Maybe he doesn't have those kind of thoughts, but I don't know. I feel like that's probably at some point that would go through his mind of, you know, have I been doing this wrong the whole time? Could I have actually helped these people in a different way?
And one future where the boy took his knife and wounded Curze. His survival would turn him into the most heinous monster, the one who had survived the Night Haunter. A mistake that would dampen the fear the Night Haunter inspired. No, that future could not happen. Konrad would not allow it. Reeling from the sensation of the visions, the Night Haunter strode forward, ending the vile criminal's life, even as he turned to see the boy's knife on the ground, out of reach. Was it fear or doubt that drove him to choose this outcome? Or were the other possible outcomes merely just illusion? The vision of his death at the order of his father remained. Some futures of Konrad felt more real, like this was the true event to come, and yet all still led to that haunting death. It was like no matter what he did, he was following a path set out for him. Like it was all fated. Each act of justice was a predetermined event. Each choice, each grueling torture was fated, and Konrad was just riding the path created for him. He had no choice. And so the Night Haunter continued. He began to ramp up. Criminals of all ages, even those whose crimes were petty at most, found a dark spectre hunting them. Weeks of anguish followed, by a death so haunting it scarred the living of Nostromo, becoming a very silent place. Ascending to the very heights of the Hive cities, Konrad presented himself before the terrified nobles, begging them to kneel and follow his law or be destroyed. Some never left that council. The rest knelt before their master. A dark king had risen. Falling in line to the superhuman Night Haunter, Konrad began his reign of justice, utilizing the vast communication network of the Hive cities. The capture, death, and torture of criminals was cast throughout the cities, all mandated to witness the justice taking place. But this reign of dread was not solely a barbaric one. Corruption was eliminated. Illumination was brought to the previous crime-laden depths. The people did not starve. A living wage was mandated. No one was the victim of crime either. It was Konrad's serenity.
So he kind of made this, he actually kind of brought about this almost utopia. Everyone had a living wage, crime went away, there was actually order. And again, that goes back to what I said earlier. I wonder how much of this was more of a need for order than it is really for justice, and just that's like twisted in his mind. You know, I don't know, but it's interesting that, and I wonder, you know, had he not gone that route earlier, could he have achieved that earlier? You know what I mean? But
millions of people lived healthy, safe lives, but in uncompromising, unnerving silence. Families sat at home, dreading to speak, not to mistakenly incur the gaze of the Night Haunter. Decades passed, and Nostromo had been transformed. Not a single crime had been committed in living memory, but everything would change on the day that Konrad knew would come to pass.
yeah,
A day he had seen in his prescience. At the borders of Nostromo, the Great Crusade had arrived. Descending from the dark skies like a shining beacon, an army landed. The procession made its way through the illuminated, clean streets, all the way to the Night Haunter's palace. The pale-skinned, dark-eyed Nostromans wept. The majesty, such perfection. Some even went blind. Standing before the Dark King, Konrad finally lay his true eyes upon his father, the Emperor of mankind.
It is better by far to be an object of fear than of respect. For one is a truth of the soul, and the other an illusion of the mind. You understand?
isn't that supposed to be Dracula? Is that like an actual quote from the real Vlad the Impaler? You know, the guy that Dracula is based off of.
Stand now, and the other an illusion of the mind. You understand now, for them and for all enemies. Yes, I wanted to be ruthless. Let fear enter in them once and for all, because only with terror could I change anything in this world.
Well, and I mean, he did. You know, through fear, he essentially made his world safe. It's I wonder, like, because in order to obviously really police all the hive worlds or hive cities and whatnot on his world, you know, he would have had to have had some kind of force, police force and forces or whatever that, you know, would either report or do his will. So, because even for a Primarch, they can't be everywhere at once. So I wonder, you know, what kind of infrastructure he had set up through that. It might have just been through the the nobles, aristocrats, you know, whatever, that he essentially subjugated and said, hey, you're going to follow my law or I'm just going to murder all you guys and replace you and with people who will. I wonder if they just essentially, you know, set up a police force from their own personnel they already had and they just followed his way of being. But I mean, he cleaned up the world, no crime. It was safe for people. They made a living wage. Families could, you know, the streets were cleaned up. And you know, it worked. You know, you can't, I guess, really argue with that kind of progress and change, regardless of, I guess, the cost.
Curze. Never once had Rogal Dorn called him by his forename.
Brother.
He had replied.
Throne, what are you doing here?
Demanded Dorn, his normal, affable tone swallowed in the depths of his outrage. A phalanx of golden-armed warriors followed their lord, and Curze had immediately sensed the tension in the air.
Punishing the guilty.
He answered coolly.
Restoring order.
The Primarch of the Imperial Fist shook his head.
This is not order, Curze, it is murder. Command your warriors to stand down. My Imperial Fists will take over this sector.
Stand down,
said Curze.
Are they not the enemy?
Not anymore,
said Dorn.
They are prisoners now, but soon they will be a compliant population and part of the Imperium. Have you forgotten the Emperor's purpose in declaring the Great Crusade?
To conquer,
said Curze.
No,
said Dorn, placing a golden gauntlet on his shoulder guard.
We are liberators, not destroyers, brother. We bring the light of illumination, not death. We must govern with benevolence if these people are ever to recognize our authority in this galaxy.
Curze flinched at the touch, resenting the easy friendship Dorn pretended. Bileless anger bubbled invisibly beneath his skin, but if Dorn was aware of it, he gave no sign.
These people resisted us and must pay the penalty for that crime,
said Curze.
Obedience to the Imperium will come from the fear of punishment. You know that as well as anyone, Dorn. Kill those that resisted and the others will learn the lesson that to oppose us is to die.
Dorn shook his head, taking his arm to lead him away from the curious stares their heated discussion was attracting.
You are wrong, but we should speak of this in private.
No,
said Curze, angrily shrugging off Dorn's grip.
You think these people will bend the knee meekly to us because we show compassion? Mercy is for the weak and foolish. It will only breed corruption and eventually betrayal. Fear of reprisals will keep the rest of this planet in check, not benevolence.
Dorn sighed.
And the hatred planted in those you leave alive will pass from one generation to the next until this world is engulfed in a war, the cause of which none of those fighting will remember. It will never end. Don't you see that?
Yeah.
Hate only breeds hate, and the Imperium cannot be built upon such bloody foundations.
And I mean, true, the other thing is, like, how are you going to enforce that kind of rule on the kind of grand scale that the Imperium is trying to become in the galaxy? You know what I mean? Like, you can't 100% police every single world that way. You know what I mean? Each world is gonna have some kind of autonomy, which is obviously why, you know, they have the aristocrats that pretty much run the worlds as they see fit, as long as they contribute what they're supposed to the Imperium kind of a situation currently. You know, I don't know how that worked when the Emperor was around, but I mean, yeah, it might work for a certain amount of time and on a certain number of worlds, but in the long run, all it would do is just fuel more dissent and rebellion, and then you're just gonna have to kill more people, etc., you know?
All empires are forged in blood,
said Curze.
To pretend otherwise is naive. The rule of law cannot be maintained by the blind hope that human nature is inherently good. Haven't we seen enough to know that ultimately the mass of humanity must be forced into compliance?
I cannot believe I'm hearing this,
said Dorn.
What has gotten into you, Curze?
Nothing that has not always been there, Dorn.
Said Curze, striding away from the mighty golden figure and holding one of the few remaining prisoners upright by the front of his tunic. He scooped up a fallen bolter and thrust the heavy weapon into the prisoner's trembling hands. Curze leaned down and said,
Go ahead. Kill me.
The terrified man shook his head, the oversized weapon shaking in his hands as he thought his limbs were paralyzed.
No.
Said Curze.
Why not?
The prisoner tried to speak, but was so awed by the terrifying proximity of the Primarch that his words were unintelligible.
Are you afraid you will be killed?
The man nodded, and Curze addressed his warriors.
No one harms this man. No matter what happens, he is not to be punished.
Curze turned and walked back towards Dorn, with his arms stretched out to either side of him, presenting his back to the prisoner. No sooner than he had turned away from the armed man than the gun had been raised and the hard crack of a bolt shot split the air. Sparks flew as the explosive shell ricocheted from Curze's armor, and he spun around on his heel to smash the prisoner's skull to splinters with his fist. The headless corpse swayed for a moment before dropping slowly to its knees and pitching onto his chest.
You see,
said Curze, his fingers dripping with blood and bone fragments.
And what was that supposed to prove?
Asked Dorn, his features curled in distaste.
that any chance mortals get, they will choose the path of descent. When he thought he would be punished, he dared not shoot. But the moment he believed himself free from consequence, he acted.
That was an unworthy deed,
said Dorn, and Curze had turned away from him before he could elaborate, but the Imperial Fist Primarch caught his arm.
Your warriors will stand down and withdraw, Curze. That is an order, not a request. Leave this planet, now.
Dorn's eyes were hard as granite, and Curze knew enough of his brother's resolve to realize he had pushed him far enough.
When this campaign is won, you and I will have words, Curze. You have crossed the line, and I will no longer countenance your barbarous methods of war. Your way is not the way of the Imperium.
I think you might be right,
whispered Curze.
Very interesting interaction between the two. I'm assuming this is the end of the interaction because of the pause there. But I mean, like, they're pretty much opposites, obviously. They're seeking order, but in two different ways. He's seeking order through, I guess you could say, compassion. You know, he understands that the people that they're subjugating are meant to be part of the Imperium. You know, they're not, once they've been liberated, they're no longer the enemy. You know, and so they're brought into the fold and are essentially, I guess from Curze's perspective, would be forgiven of their sins. But it's also an interesting, you know, point that Curze really does makes with his demonstration that, you know, life without consequences, people will just do whatever they want to. And there has to be some kind of obvious law and consequence for your actions. It's just, do they need to be that extreme? No, but there needs to be some kind of punishment, you know? So, I mean, I feel like the truth really for the Imperium probably is somewhere in the middle ground between these two. But interesting, very interesting interaction between the two of them. And I'm pretty sure from the Sevetar video, I think Sevetar was there during this. I could be wrong, though. I might be misthinking, because I remember that Sevetar had a rivalry, I thought, with Dorn's right-hand man as well. But I might be misremembering. I could be misremembering. But anyway, let's continue.
To be right,
whispered Curze. Look out at my father's Imperium. Do not unroll a parchment map or analyze a hololithic star chart. Merely raise your head to the night sky and open your eyes. Stare into the blackness between worlds. That dark ocean, the silent sea, stare into the million eyes of firelight, each a sun to be subjugated in the Emperor's grip. The age of the alien, the era of the inhuman is over. Mankind is in its ascendancy, and with 10,000 claws we will lay claim to the stars themselves. The Great Crusade, the reconquest of the galaxy, the unification of the race of mankind. Meeting his father at the steps of his Nostromo palace, Konrad was overcome by his prescient visions. It was so violent and horrifying that even he, a Primarch who had butchered and tortured thousands of people, tried to claw his own eyes out. Only with the intervention of the Emperor was he stopped, calming him, bidding he be at peace. The Night Haunter, also like playing a role, acting out what was destined to be, submitted himself before the Emperor, pledging his loyalty. Like all Primarchs before him, Konrad did not join the legion that had been created from his own genetic material. He began his induction under his brother Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's children. Of all the brothers that strode through Nostromo on that fateful day, it was Fulgrim alone who had the decency to look him in the eye. Konrad began to pick up the information and battle doctrine at frightening speed, the gift of his superhuman genetics showing just how elevated he was, despite his somewhat barbaric origins. Fighting and learning by Fulgrim's side, he saw how the Imperium fought, how Astartes fought. He saw how Fulgrim used his legion as a symbol. Paragons decked out in ornate, beautiful armor. He saw the power of imagery.
Interesting.
With the tutelage coming to an end, the first recruits drawn from Nostromo had been raised up, elevated to Astartes, and finally the Legion, Nostromans, and Primarchs were merged. The 8th Legion, now the Night Lords, were ready for the Great Crusade. Like all Primarchs, Konrad
Weren't the first of the 8th Legion though? His legion actually made from like Terrans or people from other worlds? I thought that's what the case. I thought there was already a lot of Astartes. Or did he say, he said at the beginning of this little part there that he didn't want to join them though, right? I don't know, because kind of want to rewind a little bit here and just hear that part again. We're at 4010.
claws we will lay claim to the stars themselves. Unification Nostromo palace. Konrad was overcome by his father at the unification of the race of mankind. Meeting his father at the steps of his Nostromo palace, Konrad was overcome by his prescient visions. It was so violent and horrifying that even he, a Primarch who had butchered, only with the intervention of the peace, the destined to be, submitted himself before the Emperor, pledging his loyalty.
I'm looking for a certain part in this.
Genetic material. He began. Konrad did not join the legion that had been created from his own genetic material.
There. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So he kind of rejected the ones that were already made for him. Cause that's what I thought. I thought I had, heard that or remembered that he'd already had a legion, made for him. But he's saying here that he didn't join them, and so he kind of rejected them and then made a batch of Astartes from his own people on his planet. Okay. I got it now.
Great Crusade. Of all Primarchs, Konrad began to mold his legion, teaching them the aximons he had created, the mixing of his personal philosophy with the logistics of warfare. It is far better to be an object of fear than of respect, for one is a truth of the soul, and the other an illusion of the mind. He taught his sons to become icons of fear.
Very Predator-esque clause there. I dig it.
Of the mind. He taught his sons to become icons of fear. Fear is the greatest of all weapons. Fear will cow a world where guns will not. We spill blood to save blood. Why use terror? Terror is a clean blade. Its cuts disarm opponents without doing them harm.
I mean, it's not wrong. Like, fear can be an extremely powerful tool when used in the right way. And I mean, there have been numerous times throughout, you know, history in our world where, you know, armies and battles have been won before shots have been fired because of psychological and fear tactics used properly to, you know, intimidate the other side. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know I've read about some, you know, historic battles where things like that have happened. You know, so he's not wrong in that statement when used properly. It's just his guys like kind of take it to the extreme. I really dig the armor though. I like the whole like skeletal rib, you know, looking stuff here. That's pretty dope. And like again, like the Predator S claws, I dig it.
Clean blade. Its cuts disarm opponents without doing them harm. Terror is the friend of compliance. The few must die in pain so that the many can live in peace. Fear is the road to civilization. The ends justifies the means. Even on those cold, damp, rotten streets of Nostromo, Konrad had burned into his core that sense of wanting to make the universe right. Perhaps the way the Emperor had made him. He had learned that these panicky, gossipy beasts that was humanity needed to be shepherded. He truly did believe in a united humanity, a universe purged of xenos and mutants, a serene utopia where fear kept the rabble in line. You understand now. For them and for all enemies, yes, I wanted to be ruthless. Let fear enter in them once and for all, because only with terror could I change anything in this world. The 8th Legion became a force of terror. Konrad and his sons molded their armor into wicked shapes, displaying flayed skin and skull trophies like medals. They utilized horrific sounds, screams that would disorientate and spark dread. His sons became the tools, the extensions of his teachings. Legends such as Zo-Sahal, Shang, Fel-Zarost, Talos, and his most favored son, Sevetar. World upon world, all proud and brave in the face of conquerors, did not understand what was coming. The Night Lords, the Night Haunter. Upon entering the war zone, they wouldn't attack. The defenders' brave chants and boasting, rising like a crescendo until they realized the truth. Captives had been taken. Their screams of agony was broadcasted for weeks. The panicky, gossipy beasts would start to dread the night, alone with the bone-chilling sounds. And then they came. Superhuman warriors, in midnight clad, covered in still warm blood, led by an enormous figure that invoked our primordial fears. You can imagine the absolute bone-rattling dread that would grip you, looking at the sea of monsters approaching. The surrender always came quickly. World upon world fell to Konrad and the 8th. So many had been spared death, but many of his brothers decried his way of war. Dorn tried to reason with him, telling him that the hatred planted in those that lived would pass on from generation to generation until the worlds it would be engulfed in a war that the cause of which none of those fighting will remember. It would never end. How could he not see that? But it didn't matter. Terror is the friend of compliance. So long as they were afraid, humanity would be compliant.
I mean, it sounds like he's right at home, man. And yeah, he just goes out there and uses terror to keep people in line. And like I said earlier, and from the Sevetar video, it really sounds like his whole idea was that the harm that he was doing to those now was for the greater good. By, you know, doing this, he's keeping others in line and showing others that, you know, this is the punishment that will come to you if you defy the word of the Emperor, if you turn from us. And if you are compliant, you can then live a happy, healthy life. You know, all you have to do is just comply and don't turn against us. Otherwise, this is what awaits you. This terrible, horrible, torturous, brutal death, you know, before you actually die. So, I mean, yeah, terror tactics work, man. They work. It's just he definitely takes it to the extreme.
Take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder, and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy, and yet you act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some righteous in the universe by which it may be judged.
At times, in raptures of pain, I saw what was to occur laid out before me. In these waking dreams, I took countless lives with my bare hands, heads taken as trophies. I died again and again at the hands of my father, my sons butchered and maimed by their brothers. My name was to become synonymous with dread, but most vividly and most frequently, I saw my world pierced by a lance of purest light, splitting it, shattering it into dust. It was self-sacrifice. Konrad Curze, the Night Haunter, was creating a just universe for the Imperium, following his fated path created by his father's design. He would do it all, hands soaked in blood. The Great Crusade progressed for decades. The mere mention of the 8th Legion would cower worlds into obedience. They knew the stories, the horrific monsters clad in dark armor, covered in flayed skin and skulls. How death was a mercy compared to what they would do. Many, such as Dorn, decried the use of his tactics, but others were just as incensed with Konrad's twisted sense of justice. His dislike for humanity was apparent in his conflict with Magnus the Red. In a joint compliant action, Magnus sought to save the destroyed culture's libraries. The knowledge could be saved, used to aid the Imperium, but Konrad refused his brother's wishes, ordering a bombardment to destroy the last remnants of a defeated culture. What good did the knowledge of other worlds do for Nostromo? Learning of brighter places, civilizations with happy, compliant people. Knowledge for Magnus was freedom, a concept the Night Haunter hated. The people did not need to be free. Their freedom led to choice, and choice led to crime. Freedom challenged the Night Haunter's justice. Though he despised the Emperor, his father, he still believed in a just society of humanity.
I wonder if he despised them because of the dreams that he had of being killed by the Emperor's assassin, but maybe not necessarily having the full context of what led to that, I guess, maybe. Or if he just in general just despised the Emperor because of him not going to the extremes that Konrad was willing to go to for this, you know, perfect, just universe for humanity.
It was the interpretation of that which drew the ire of so many of his brothers. Take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy. And yet, You act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some righteousness in the universe by which it may be judged. Konrad had seen how effective, how transformative his justice worked on Nostromo, that depressing hellscape. To cower and control that vile population, he had learned that only an absolute black and white system, something that disgusted his brother Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders. During a joint compliant action on the world known as Karastan, Vulcan and his Salamanders fought alongside Konrad and his Night Lords. It was only up close that the horror of Konrad's philosophy was realized. During this campaign, Vulcan became disgusted with his brother, seeing the torture, the brutality, and disregard for human life, even witnessing the Ace slaughter the inhabitants of an entire city in order to seed fear amongst the general population. Vulcan, from his first moments, had never been alone. He had a family. He was raised with love. He connected to the people of his homeworld. He understood the human experience, something Curze never had.
Yeah, I was gonna say these guys are probably couldn't be any more opposite of each other. You know, Curze never had anyone to grow up with. He grew up in a planet that he kind of really despised and had no connection to anything, and had this whole idea of needing to rule through fear and all that. And Salamanders, from what I understand, are probably the most compassionate of the Astartes legions, that they really go out of their way to help, you know, humans, humanity, innocents, and oftentimes they might lose battles because they do things that would not be necessarily tactically sound in order to safeguard civilians and things like that. So yeah, like Vulcan is, from what I understand, one of the more compassionate Primarchs. So they, yeah, I would assume they probably never got along at all and are very much, you know, opposite opinions from each other.
His first interaction with humanity was violent. He saw the world through a criminal's brain. He never saw all the good inside the hearts of mankind. Vulcan confronted Curze about his legion's actions, and the two demigods clashed. Battered and wounded by each other, Vulcan swore he would inform Horus and Dorn of his brother's disgusting actions, a slight Konrad would never forget. Vulcan had not seen humanity like he had. His sense of justice was naive. After decades of warfare against numerous Xenos species and lost colonies of mankind, the 8th Legion had cut a bloody swath across the galaxy. But the cost of decades of warfare came full circle to the Legion. Absent of the Night Haunter, Nostromo began to fall into its old ways. A coup had been launched. The old corrupt noble families, generations who had lived on a world devoid of the Night Haunter's presence.
That's pretty much what I was saying earlier. Like, the kind of rule that he's trying to enforce could only really last so long. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something you can enforce with while he's obviously absent, you know, because not everyone, excuse me, not everyone's gonna have that extreme sense of need for that kind of justice and order as he would. He would have to leave, you know, someone like Sevetar or something like that in charge of things. But anyway, let's just keep going.
Generations who had lived on a world devoid of the Night Haunter's presence had overcome their fear. For decades, the bravest, brightest minds on Nostromo had been taken, inducted into their Dark King's Legion. With the regime change, the dregs and damned, the boys who were unredeemable, languishing in prisons, were offered up. Men who were mirrors of the very criminals the Night Haunter had hunted were now transformed. They were now in midnight clad. Fear was their weapon. But slowly the Legion began to rot, filled with legionaries who turned their weapons into sadistic delight, butchering and torturing for the enjoyment Something the Night Haunter would have to cleanse.
Mm-hmm. Which he himself is also about.
Sevetar had never met the Raven Lord, only seen him from a distance, and he had never seen the Night Haunter and Corax side by side. It was said they were brothers, cast in the same mold, and truly the similarities between them were astonishing. Their skin shared death's pallor, their eyes were sinister orbs of ink, the Raven Lord's completely black, the Lord of Murder's barely less so, only a touch of white either side of his enlarged pupils. Both carried talons of steel, both evoked winged creatures of darkness, one Chiroptian, the other avian. Both were masters of the dark. Their facial features were markedly fraternal. Long, thin noses, narrow faces, high cheekbones, sharp chins, jet black hair. The differences were starker for the similarities. Curze was filthy and stank of blood. Corax was clean, his armor polished.
I wonder if this was actually supposed to be another, interrupting here, obviously, in this moment, but like, I can't help but wonder if they were actually kind of like a twin situation, kind of like how Alpharius and Omegon were. Yeah, and that's just kind of the point that I was brought up, because of how similar they were, but because of their opposite, I guess, upbringings and maybe beliefs, how different, and that's really the only difference in how they turned out. I wonder if essentially they were really kind of more, I don't know, necessarily like what are the, not identical twins, but like what I forget what the other type of twins are, where they're not identical but they're still twins. Fraternal. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but anyway, yeah, I wonder if that's what they kind of really are. Than that, not necessarily identical twins, but they were essentially twins, but just, yeah. Anyway,
and stank of blood. Corax was clean, his armor polished, but it was their expressions that they diverged the most. Corvus Corax bore a perpetual light frown, an expression of such utmost seriousness it strayed into caricature. Curze's face changed constantly, small ticks, transforming it from arch knowingness to wild-eyed threat. Signs of the incipient madness that, even then, Sevetar was becoming aware of. The possibility of violence turned the air to glass, which any sudden movement might shatter. Two lords of men, one midnight clad, the other armored in shadow, stared at one another. Distant rumbling sent dying tremors through the building. As the bombardment moved on to the other districts, Corax broke the silence first.
What is the meaning of this, my brother?
He said, gesturing meter-long claws at the mess of the slain.
What happened to your warriors?
Unable to help himself, the Night Haunter snarled. He caught it and turned it into a mocking smile, but not before all present had seen his anger. He was a predator challenged by something just as dangerous. For a moment, Konrad Curze exhibited weakness.
I happened to them,
said Curze evenly. Corax looked over the ruined flesh in the room in disbelief.
What have you done?
Curze smiled blackly.
An internal dispute, Lord Corax.
He said airily.
A legion matter that I have resolved. You must understand there are many criminals in your legion also. You have your ways of dealing with those who stray too far from the bounds of good conduct.
He poked a blade of mercy through the shattered eye lens of a helm and held it up for Corax to see.
This is mine.
Corax's eyes lingered on the blood staining Curze's chin.
Then perhaps you could tell me why you are bombarding this already compliant sector.
This Raven Lord has fought most of his brothers. Let our Lord teach him a lesson.
For Vox Sevetar.
I say we fight.
Do not open fire!
Sevetar ordered. The muted clicks on the Raven's voxes intruded on their frequency, a sure sign the ravens were also communing with each other. From their stance, he guessed their conversation was going the same way. Curze shifted his weight imperceptibly. Corax reacted in kind. His fingers twitched a fraction of a millimeter. The pair of them appeared at ease, but they were a hair's breadth away from striking. Don't, Curze, thought Sevetar. Don't fight him. Curze narrowed his eyes, crinkled with a smile. A little tension bled from the room.
We are the weapon of fear no other legion dared to be. We are the glorious Eighth. You think I am a monster? I am a simple tool, like you. We have different uses, though identical edges.
I do not think anything about you, other than the disgust I feel for your methods,
said Corax. Curze shrugged.
You may join the line of all the others who feel the same. I don't care. I am exactly as the Emperor intended me to be. Are you really any better than I, Corax Shadow Skulker? The 19th are assassins. We are all killers. We are brothers in methods as well as in blood.
Our way is clean,
said Corax. Sevetar found his voice annoyingly lugubrious. Such misery. They said he was raised in a prison, and that accounted for his saturnine demeanor. Sevetar wanted to hurl him into the deeps of Nostromo's hives, so he might better learn what lawlessness was. Self-obsessed, unable to see the truth for their own aggrandized woes. Curze was lonely in being true to himself. He was a fiend, but at least he was honest.
No war is clean. All of them come with a price.
Curze continued.
Some are more obvious than others, that is all, and the price must always be paid.
Curze sighed, shrinking into himself, bored.
War's reckoning awaits you. Do you wish to know the cost?
Corax's black, unreadable eyes rested on Curze for several seconds.
I will return to my ship. Stop this bombardment. The conquest is falling behind schedule. We risk turning the population further from the Emperor's light.
I think you'll find them most pliable when I am done,
said Curze.
My Lord Curze.
Sevetar said stiffly, and severed the vox.
My Lord Night Haunter. What are your orders?
Sevetar asked the question as neutrally as he could, belying his concern that the answer might result in a command to hunt down their allies.
Let them go,
said Curze sadly.
Now is not the time for us to kill our brethren.
Interesting interaction between the two of them. For how similar they are, you know, showing their differences. I wonder if any of the Primarchs did any of the Primarchs at all have like any kind of like positive feelings or thoughts towards Konrad? It seems like he really didn't have any kind of connection with any of the Primarchs and really didn't have any kind of care for anyone. There was something else that I was going to bring up from that I can't think of now. Trying to remember. I mean, the whole Sevetar hoping that Konrad wouldn't start the fight. I don't think it was a situation because he thought Konrad would probably lose the Corvax. Maybe he did, maybe not. I just don't think he wanted to have a fight between the two legions because that would have been disastrous, obviously. And it could have, turned out bad for Konrad. But there was some kind of quote. Let me go back and I'm gonna listen to some of this again, I guess, because there was something that Konrad said that I wanted to remark on that I can't think of off the top of my head. So it's
even Lord, only seen him from a distance, and he had never seen the Night Haunter and Corax side by side. It was said they were brothers, cast in the same mold, and truly the similarities between them were astonishing. Their skin shared death's pallor, Their eyes were sinister orbs barely left. Both carried chiroptia. Features were high cheekbones. For the Corax was clean. Corvus Corax bore a perpetual light frown, an expression of such utmost seriousness.
Trying to get to the actual conversation they have here.
Forming it from arch knowingness to wild-eyed threat. Signs of the incipient madness that, even then, Sevetar was becoming aware of. The possibility of violence turned the air to glass, which any sudden movement might shatter. Two lords of men. One midnight. Distant rumbling sent dying tremors through the building. As the bombardment moved on to the other districts, Corax broke the silence first.
What is the meaning of this, my brother?
He said, gesturing meter-long claws at the mess of the slain.
What happened to your warriors?
Unable to help himself, the Night Haunter snarled. He caught it and turned it into a mocking smile, but not before all present had seen his anger. He was a predator challenged by something just as dangerous. For a moment, Konrad Curze exhibited weakness.
I happened to them,
said Curze evenly. Corax looked over the ruined flesh in the room in disbelief.
What have you done?
Curze smiled blackly.
An internal dispute, Lord Corax.
He said airily.
A legion matter that I have resolved. You must understand there are many criminals in your legion also. You have your ways of dealing with those who stray too far from the bounds of good conduct.
He poked a blade of mercy through the shattered
I wonder what he would consider good conduct. You know what I mean? Like,
eye lens of a helm, and held it up for Corax to see.
This is mine.
Corax's eyes lingered on the blood staining Curze's chin.
Then perhaps you could tell me why you are bombarding this already compliant sector.
This Raven Lord has fought most of his brothers. Let our Lord teach him a lesson.
For Vox Sevetar.
I say we fight.
Do not open fire!
Sevetar ordered. The muted clicks on the Raven's Voxes intruded on their frequency, a sure sign the Ravens were also communing with each other. From their stance, he guessed their conversation was going the same way. Curze shifted his weight imperceptibly. Corax reacted in kind. His fingers twitched a fraction of a millimeter. The pair of them appeared at ease, but they were a hair's breadth away from striking. Don't, Curze, thought Sevetar. Don't fight him. Curze narrowed his eyes, crinkled with a smile. A little tension bled from the room.
We are the weapon of fear no other legion dared to be. We are the glorious Eighth. You think I am a monster? I am a simple tool, like you. We have different uses, though identical edges.
I do not think anything about you, other than the disgust I feel for your methods,
said Corax. Curze shrugged.
You may join the line of all the others who feel the same. I don't care.
seems to be everyone.
I'm exactly as the Emperor intended me to be.
That's what it was right there. That's what the line I was looking for. It's an interesting justification that you could use, being that you were created obviously by the Emperor, and that all of them were essentially created to be tools for the Great Crusade. And knowing that, you could easily justify any action you take to say that it's what I'm doing is for the Emperor, and this is how I'm doing it is the way, the way I'm doing it, how I'm doing it is because of how the Emperor made me. And this is just my nature. This is how I'm doing it. You might not like it, but too bad. This is how I get things done. And the Emperor isn't doing anything about it, so obviously he's happy with it. That's the quote, the line that I was looking for. It's a very interesting way to justify your actions by saying, hey, it's the Emperor's will. He made me this way. We were made in his image and his likeness, so I can, just how it is.
Are you
we'll finish the rest of this, but I'm gonna close out this half of the video pretty shortly after this here, but we'll finish this quote again in case anything else sparks my mind here.
Really any better than I, Corax Shadow Skulker? The 19th are assassins. We are all killers. We are brothers in methods as well as in blood.
Our way is clean,
said Corax. Sevetar found his voice annoyingly lugubrious.
It's interesting also too that they they use fear, but in different ways. Like he uses brutality, and I haven't gotten into Corax that much, but I know in general their tactics are kind of hit and run, stealthy assassin based tactics. So I would assume, being he says that their methods are clean, you know, they strike terror in those. I don't know if more deserving is the proper word, or you know, there aren't so many innocents that get harmed. You know, he can make the distinction between those who really are, you know, evil and have done bad versus those who maybe have had to do things in circumstance and, you know, doles out punishments accordingly. You know, I don't know. It's not really kind of what I'm looking for, but I guess just his method of clean, I guess, is, you know, maybe, I don't know. I think it's just more of the situation of it's not quite so brutal, and he gets his message of fear across just as well as him without having to torture and delight in it. I guess is what I'm looking for.
Such misery. They said he was raised in a prison, and that accounted for his saturnine demeanor. Sevetar wanted to hurl him into the deeps of Nostromo's hives, so he might better learn what lawlessness was. Self-obsessed, unable to see the truth for their own aggrandized woes. Curze was lonely in being true to himself. He was a fiend, but at least he was honest.
And it's also interesting from Sevetar's perspective, like he understands, because he grew up on the world, he understands Curze's perspective more, but he also understands the madness that is taking hold of him and concerns him from watching the video that I've seen before. And Sevetar is really kind of the only one that Konrad kind of really listens to, even though I think Konrad even didn't really care for him that much. Konrad didn't really care for anyone. I could be mistaking that though. But yeah, I just find it interesting that Sevetar really is kind of like at a certain point almost acts like his conscience. You know, he still follows Konrad's orders and whatever he wants to do, but he's the only one that can kind of temper him in certain ways, you know, keep him from going off the deep end, I guess you could say.
No war is clean. All of them.
And that's very, yeah, pretty powerful counter to that. No war is clean, and it's very true. There is no war that's clean.
With a price.
Curze continued.
Some are more obvious than others, that is all. And the price must always be paid.
Curze sighed, shrinking into himself, bored.
War's reckoning awaits you. Do you wish to know the cost?
Corax's black, unreadable eyes rested on Curze for several seconds.
I will return to my ship. Stop this bombardment. The conquest is falling behind schedule. We risk turning the population further from the Emperor's light.
I think you'll find them most pliable when I am done,
said Curze.
My Lord Curze.
Sevetar said stiffly, and severed the vox.
My Lord Night Haunter, what are your orders?
Sevetar asked the question as neutrally as he could, belying his concern that the answer might result in a command to hunt down their allies.
Let them go,
said Curze sadly.
Now is not the time for us to kill our brethren.
Very interesting interaction. So yeah, pretty much given my thoughts on everything so far through it. This is the first half. I'm gonna end the video here at this half. and I'll pick up with the other half in the next video. So yeah, I appreciate you guys hanging out and chilling and watching this video with me. I hope you're enjoying my reaction so far to this. As always, there will be a link down below in the description to the Amber King's channel and to this original video of his without my commentary, reaction, etc. If you've been enjoying this so far, consider leaving a like and a sub. And like I said, we'll continue with the second half here. And yeah, I'll get that up and out as soon as possible. So thank you guys again for hanging out. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys on the next one.